Hello and welcome. Good morning. Welcome to everyone to this session of conversations with Dr. Gita Chadha and Dr. Enakshi Bhattacharya. I am Shubashree Desikan. We are going to, this is a commemorative sort of conversation which we want to have on behalf of the International Day for Women and Girls in Science. Let me introduce to you the speakers of today. First, let me introduce Dr. Enakshi Bhattacharya. She did her PhD from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Mumbai in 1985 and postdoctoral work at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, USA in 1986 to 88. She was on the faculty of the Department of Physics, IIT Kanpur for nearly close to a decade and then on
3
the
years.
faculty
3 years.
3 years, sorry. And then on the faculty of the Department of Electrical Engineering at IIT from 91 to 24, chairing the department during 2010 to 13. She took a sabbatical in 2000 with Analog Devices USA and spent a semester at IIT Mandi in 2017. She played a key role in establishing the Center for NEMS and Nanophotonics at the IIT Madras in 2011, which was then a part of the National Nanoelectronics Network for Research and Applications. Her expertise is in silicon technology and its interdisciplinary applications in MEMS, biosensors, nanoporous membranes, and silicon nitride photonics. She's a senior member of the IEEE Electronic Devices Society, a distinguished service awardee from the Institute of Smart Structure and Systems, India, IEEE Sensors Council Distinguished Lecturer in 2021 to 24, and Chair Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the IEEE Sensors Council for 2025 and 26. So with such an illustrious background, Enakshi, we really hope to hear a lot of things from you today. And then there is Dr. Gita Chadha, who comes from a totally different discipline of sociology. Gita Chadha is a professor at the School of Arts and Science. She's an honorary senior fellow at the Archives National
Azim Premji University.
Azim Premji University, sorry. Azim Premji University, and she's an honorary senior fellow at the Archives National Center for Biological Sciences, NCBS. She held the Obaid Siddiqui Chair position for the year 23 to 24 at NCBS. Prior to that, she was a faculty member at the Department of Sociology in the University of Mumbai for over a decade, where she was a chairperson of the University Women's Development Cell of the University Women's Development Cell of the University of Mumbai. Gita is a sociologist by training and a feminist by conviction. She brings the two together in her research and pedagogy. Gita designed and taught the first of its kind course in feminist science studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, India, along with Chayanika Shah. She has designed innovative pedagogic initiatives for integrating science and social science teaching for the Center for Study of Culture and Society, Bengaluru, India, and for the National Center for Biological Sciences. Gita has co-edited several volumes. Recently, the volume Mapping Scientific Method, Disciplinary Narrations with Rennie Thomas, and published by Routledge. Her path-breaking volumes on feminists and science, critics and changing perspectives in India are co-edited with Sumi Krishna and are published by Sri Samya. With Asha Achudan, she edited a special issue of the Review of Women's Studies of the Economic and Political Weekly titled Feminist Science Studies, Intersectional Narratives of Persons in Gender Marginal Locations in Science in 2017. With this background, I invite you, Gita, for this interesting conversation. There's much more to Gita, which we will find out as we speak today. Thank you.
So before we start our conversation, let me introduce Shubha to everybody. Shubashree Desikan is a science journalist with IIT Madras's Shastra magazine. She did her master's in physics from Madras University PhD in Theoretical Condensed Matter Physics from Institute of Mathematical Sciences, Chennai, and postdocs at Harishchandra Research Institute and IIT Kanpur. She was a science journalist with The Hindu for 10 years. She was given the National Award for Science Communication in Print for the year 2017 by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. So it's a great pleasure to be here. I hand over to Shubha now to take us forward.
Yeah. First
Actually,
time.
no, I think I'm supposed to do the first
Yes,
round.
yes, yes.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So let me start the conversation with since it is the International Day for Girls and Women in Science, I thought it would be a good place for us to start by reflecting back and looking into our personal archive of memory. To go back and reflect, Enakshi and Shubha, if I may invite you, to some of the early recollections that you have of your relationship with science as, say, a young girl. You know, when did the romance begin? Enakshi, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I actually did my schooling all over India. I think I went to six or seven schools because my father used to get transferred a lot. But from ninth onwards, I have till PhD, I was in Bombay. And I come from a very non-academic family, government servants, as they called them. And doctors, maybe on my mother's side, but nobody doing science. I used to really love maths, and I think I want to emphasize the role of teachers. In your, as a student, with whether you develop a fondness for a subject, and especially subjects like physics and all, which you really need the help of teachers. A good teacher matters. And fortunately, in the last 3 years of my school, we had a fantastic mathematics teacher, Gosavi sir. He was part-time. He used to just go around all over Bombay teaching maths. I mean, I now realize that he taught us concepts that you cannot divide by zero, or the importance of units, which I always told my PhD students, even that, how you can just realize that a problem is going wrong by checking the units and the small checks. So anyway, I liked maths a lot. Somehow science teachers were okay. So I have a fondness for science. And as we were talking yesterday, and Gita said, if you had good marks, you had to go for science.
Yes.
So, so I was in the 11+4 in those days, SSC, and then 4 years. So first year I joined science, and most of my classmates, the women, the girls, wanted to do medicine. So in inter, we had to choose between maths and bio. And immediately we had like 6 girls in a class of 175 because most of them dropped out. And so on it went. So junior BSc was physics and maths, and finally physics. So even though maths was more interesting to me when I first joined and had even registered for maths honors, once it started getting abstract, I think I lost interest. Also, we had very good physics teachers, SIS College, CPN Menon and Venkataraman. So I switched to physics. And then it kind of, happened naturally that I joined IIT Bombay for MSc. Again, but till then, I didn't even know that I'm going to follow a career in science. In fact, my dad used to say, no, everybody says chemistry is good. You should do chemistry. Jobs are easier in chemistry. Physics, you won't get jobs. And I preferred physics to chemistry. It was only after joining IIT Bombay, I saw all these professional women who had a career in mind. That's when I started getting serious. My classmates, Gita Udgaonkar, her father was a professor in TIFR. And so I think that's when it changed. And then, in fact, in my final years, one of our professors in IIT Bombay asked me to join for PhD with him. And I was about to join. And then I thought, why not try TIFR And then once I visited TIFR, I said, whatever they give me, whatever position.
What a campus.
Yeah. It's a fantastic campus. And TIFR was really fantastic. So beyond that, of course, it went.
Lovely. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Shubha, you want to share your early engagement with science? How did it develop?
I think it started pretty early for me because I remember there was an encyclopedia my parents had got for me. And there was some story about, there was a section on astronomy where it
Mm.
said that the sun would die in 5 billion years. And
Mm.
5, 5 million or billion, I'm not sure. So I
The-
think 0.5 billion years. So I saw that and I was completely shocked. There's the sun you see every day rising and setting, and there's no change in it. And it's going to die one day. So that kind of made me very curious about astronomy and astrophysics. That was probably the start of it all. And then later, my family was also like Enakshi's. There were many doctors there in my mother's side, and father's side was full of accountants and chartered accountants and all that.
Mm.
So there was no one doing science. So I was the first person to go into this thing. I remember when I was in 12th, praying hard that I shouldn't get into engineering, and
Mm.
because I knew that if at all I did get into the entrance exam, there would be no two ways about it. I would have to go that way. So thankfully, I took science and physics. Um then the second turning point was again TIFR, actually, strangely, where they were holding an MSc program that time jointly with Pune University, and I got selected for that. But I wasn't able to complete the course because I fell sick and I had to return. But during that time, we had a sort of refresher course in TIFR before that, just for the students who had come through the entrance exam channel. That
Mm.
was really exciting to see TIFR and its great,
Once again, what a glorious campus.
glorious campus and all that. So I was really seduced by the prospects of being a physicist and all that. But I
Yeah.
think the roots were way back when I saw the
Okay.
sun for the
Okay.
first time in the
So
US.
yeah, so let me also share. Though I'm not a scientist, I let me also share my early experiences of the joy of the biology journal, and the biology lab in school. I mean, I used to take maximum pride in my drawings in biology and my experimental journals, keeping them in order. I used to store broken test tubes from the
I was the worst.
Why
My
you didn't like drawing?
drawings, I was terrible at it.
That's why you became a physicist. So I would love all those drawings and I would get those beautiful shaded pencils and things like that. And it's very interesting, I must tell you. So when our daughter got interested in art at a certain age, we wanted to send her to art school. And we asked our very, very dear friend Nalini Malani whether we should do that. And she said, please don't, because she will learn drawing and art more probably in the class in anatomy and biology than she would in art class. So I remember that joy of the journal, biology journal, joy of the magic of the chemistry lab. But like you, Enakshi, I think I might have what I used to love, algebra and things like that, quadratic equations. Somewhere I think it just sort of dropped off, maybe because of family, because family wanted you to, if you're doing science, they wanted me to be a doctor, you know, especially girl and professional and, that kind of ambition. But coming back to the story you were saying, which I referred to, I was standing in a line for admissions after plus 10, actually in Elphinstone College in the late 70s in Bombay. And I was in the line seeking admission. I reached the top of the desk, and there's a very senior professor there, and he tells me, you're in the wrong line, go into the right line. So I said, why? What is the right line? He said, that's the science line. So I said, but I've come here to do arts. He said, no, with this percentage, you cannot do arts, you should be doing
Yeah.
science. And this was a very senior professor of economics, Professor Namjoshi. I went back to him and told him, why did you say that? So that sort of it indicates to us, the way in which people choose to do science also. But, I'm also very conscious, and maybe I should table this right away, is that the three of us come from also extremely privileged, somewhat privileged caste and class backgrounds. I'm reminded of a narrative that we collected, Asha and I, for our EPW issue, which hopefully we will link to this conversation, where Bittu and Shalini and Martha speak about the complexities of entering into science. If you come from caste marginal locations, if you come from regional marginal locations, and the challenges are much, much more
I
immense.
must tell you, Geeta,
Yeah,
that for me at least the route through the journey through science was a completely uphill task.
yeah,
I
okay.
agree with you 100% that I do come from privileged background. If it was uphill for me, I hate to wonder what it is for
How difficult.
other
Yeah,
back.
it is for people who don't come with that privilege.
Why
And
was it uphill? I mean, which part was uphill? I mean,
Well,
just doing of science or getting into science? What was uphill?
no, the sociological aspect. There was so much of doubt about whether I could do science, uh,
uh,
and all that self doubt was
the
fueled
woman.
by the environment that I was in, which was always, making it out not to be a woman's. I was very good in math. I got double centum in math in school and all that. But despite that, I had internalized this thing that can I do this? So that self doubt was always pulling me down, and it was not something that came from me internally. It was a doubt that was fostered by the doubt that the society had in me at
Yeah.
every stage. That's
But we interrupted Gita.
yeah.
Gita, you had also mentioned that this woman you had interviewed who was very good in maths, and when she was
Yes.
a
So,
girl, her father kept saying. So
yeah.
that kind of thing was there. When I joined for my PhD, within 6 months, my father fixed up an arranged marriage, and he said, "Look, you'll become this bitter spinster if you don't."
Really?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finally, it was my uncle, mama, mother's brother who intervened. He said, "Yeah, yeah, this guy is good, but you can get good guys like this later also." She's just
Uh,
let her continue for 1 or 2 years. And of course, beyond 1 or 2 years, I was not listening to my dad anymore.
Thank God. No,
Yeah.
but yeah, there are these sort of stigmatization, stereotyping. On the one hand, there is this whole romance with science, and a lot of us want to be a part of that, romance with science. But I think Shubha is right in a way, and your own experience and a lot of my research in the narratives, I find that there are a lot stigmatization of the girl who is going to pursue it as science. I mean, in fact, interestingly, in Shalini's narrative, she actually says that it was not there in her household, in her family. In fact, there was so much enthusiasm and so much encouragement to do science. But as she entered the more structured professional world of science, she encountered the kind of, casteist biases and structures that are inherent in science. For example, things like what we are all talking about also. Who does theory? Shubha was talking about it yesterday. There is this whole idea that theory is somehow very masculine, and women will probably do, not theory physics, but probably will do experimental. Is that true? How has it been for
I
both of
don't I
you?
don't think that is true because as I mentioned yesterday also, maths has traditionally always had quite a few women.
Yes, in India particularly.
Yeah, and so
Yes,
has
but experimental science, I think, is probably more of a male domain, isn't it?
it
Is
was
it?
more difficult to do experimental work simply because we didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't get the correct exposure. Even in
Right,
IITs, the labs
right,
were terrible during my
right.
MSc. Hardly, you could count the experiments that worked on your fingers. So
Yeah.
that's why it became difficult. And so people, also started opting out of experimental work. And
Mm.
then good people went to theoretical physics. If
Ah,
you do good experimental work, you also have to be good in theory. It's not as if you're just,
it's
you know,
divided
are
completely. Yeah,
yeah
yeah,
doing things with your hands. So
yeah,
so that's what even the students felt. The theoretical physics professors were like everyone talked about them in the
yeah,
corridors. The experimental physics guys went nowhere. So it's a feeling.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if it's still perpetuated, but it was
Yeah.
there when we were
Yeah,
students.
if from the outside, we do recognize when we reflect on most of our academic cultures, not true only of science, that the more abstract, more theoretical work is definitely seen as a much more placed at a higher level of the hierarchy, and therefore available to most people who come with the cultural privilege of occupying those, those higher levels. No, what would you say, Shubha? Anything that
From my
want to say
personal
about this?
experience, I would say that it was at every step as I got to higher levels of education. it became more and more difficult to convince my parents that this was the line I wanted to go to. Till my postgraduate, they were quite happy with everything. But once I wanted to step into research, there was this sudden fear that they would lose me within quotes, like because it was, I mean, both in terms of intellectual freedom and all that, it was a step further from the family. And I had to stay in a hostel for one thing, and all those things were really quite a problematic area. But about it being a male domain, there were many women in the
Theory.
place. There were in theory, yes, but far fewer than the number of men, certainly. And there were no role models like that, and
Yeah.
or if they were, we weren't in touch with them. Being in touch with other women was also very difficult because you can't seem to be ganging up as women. That would work against you, and so you had to be mixed with everybody, and then the guys would happily put one hand over each other and go for chai or whatever, or a drink or whatever, and chat. So all that was missing. So those things were all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. It is true that even as students, undergraduate as well as master's students learn more from each other than from their teacher. And that is missing because we don't have that girls' club, boys' club. That discussion, I think that's a very important part that we missed during BSc, MSc, maybe it wasn't so much. But I think this thing about hanging with other girls is going to be, that is more personal, Shubha. I mean, I never felt that. I mean, whether I was hanging around with my girlfriends or my other boys in the class, guys in the class, I don't think it mattered much. So maybe that is more of a personal
Maybe it was
perspective.
an anecdotal thing. Yeah, may not be.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but I think these anecdotes or these experiential sharing also tells us that how girls and women, when they enter science, it is very difficult to integrate with these. And as we go along in the professional career, it becomes more and more sharper. Maybe some of the narratives that we have worked with definitely indicate that. But before we go there, there's another thing that I wanted to flag off here, that if you look at our school teachers, I don't know about both of you, but in our school, for example, which was a girls' convent, the norm kind of thing, all the teachers were women. All the teachers of science were women, except maths used to be an occasionally, not in my context, even maths was a female teacher. But most of the teachers are female. But so what I want to also flag off here is this whole difference between, say, research and teaching. How do you think of this? Because I feel from the outside that teaching does get feminized. Teaching of science becomes feminized, and research is seen as a much more easily accessible to men. No?
Yeah, in school, actually, you're right what you're saying, Gita. We had women teachers, and there was a certain style of teaching which was then in class 10 and 12, I went to a tuition class where this was a teaching us mathematics. There was a group of mixed group of students, both boys, girls, and there I found that the style of teaching was much more aggressive, much more much different from what we were used to in class, and that certainly helped me score better in maths. And there was also the sense of being in a open community where you are pitted against boys as well as girls. So there was that competitive thing coming in. All that was missing in the education system. In the science, I didn't go for any tuition class, so I don't know how the male teachers teach science. But definitely, I felt there was a difference in the style when.
No, but I think we need to look deeper into some of these questions about gender in science, which also is about teaching and research, who gets to do what in some extent. And as you're rightly pointing out, what are the styles of teaching? Do we see any sort of difference between a style of teaching which is much more, caring, nurturing, student-centric, and one which might be very aggressive, competitive, fully catering towards the market, so to speak. But I mean, those are wider questions that we need to think of in terms of how young girls experience science both in the family and in the home, but also in school. And when we talk about young girls, we don't mean only girls from privileged background. We also mean girls who come with a lot of social marginality. So how do we think of school education, college education, our professional spaces where we pursue our PhDs, and how do we think of making them more gender aware, gender just, or gender sensitive, you know?
Maybe Enakshi can give some insights on the challenges she faced during her
Yeah,
campus
as,
practice.
Work,
yeah.
work or during my, courses, MSc, PhD. Um, yeah, I actually didn't feel anything. I mean, except those home things of not continuing, getting married. At work, I was quite comfortable. And I'm just speaking for myself. I mean, everyone may not have been comfortable in TIF. In fact, some 3, 4 years junior to me, and then she had a lot of difficulty in the same lab, same people.
Mm.
So again, it's very difficult to, comment on these things. But really, my PhD years were great, not just work-wise. I mean, my supervisor, I was his first student, maybe because of that. But
Mm.
we were quite close. We are still close.
This
And
was at TIFR, Enakshi.
huh?
This was at TIFR.
Yeah, this was at TIF. Actually, my first supervisor ditched me. He went for a sabbatical and never came back. So his student had come back from his postdoc, and I joined with him.
I
So for about 6 months, I knew more about the problem than he did, which of course
see.
went away
It's
well
always an advantage, no?
for six
In
months.
a
Yeah,
PhD student
yeah,
advisor-student relationship.
yeah. So I felt the TIF was quite encouraging, and even the
Okay.
students and the professors. I did have some problem towards the end with my official guide. TIFR had this thing from Bombay University those days. Everyone was not registered. So the
Yeah.
person I worked with would not be my, official guide who signs all my papers. So that kind of thing, but I could handle that. When I started working, I think then I felt it more. And many times there were, of course, errors of commission, but I felt there were more times errors of omission, where they don't think, if you were a woman and a guy, the faculty joined together, opportunities, they think more often of the guy than of the woman.
Mm.
If you have to make a presentation for the department,
Mm.
let him do it. You'll never think of her. Why not?
Mm.
And for, I mean, of course, IITs have also evolved a lot. We used to have this department consultancy committee, which needed all professors, some associate professors, and some assistant professors. 10 years I was assistant professor. That's another thing, because I think
Mm.
in IIT Madras, you remained as assistant professor for 10 years. And
Mm.
it was always 2 or 3 men, not, none of us women. By then, we were, I think, 3, 4 of us already as assistant professors ever became. Of course, finally, it was all dissolved, and all faculty were members of the department concerned. And that was because of Ashok Jhunjhunwala, who was the head at that point.
Mm.
He brought in these changes, and even Professor Anand. It changed back. And the next head came, he again did this department consultancy committee.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Because
And then during hiring, of course, the director those days used to come to the department for
mm.
discussing who all
Mm.
we want, what areas we wanted hiring. He came in and said, "Where are the assistant professors?"
Mm.
Because they are the ones who are going to spend the longest number of years with
Mm.
the new recruits. So then the HOD, of course, scurried to get the
Mm.
assistant professors in.
Mm.
Yeah, so when I say errors of omission, it is leaving out, the women.
Structural
And
reasons.
then when this person goes and he makes a very good presentation, we get the project for the department. And
Mm.
then it shows up as a tick against him that he has got this project for the department. She didn't,
Yeah.
right? And that continues. And, you go along those lines for the rest. I mean, and whatever it is, finally, we all who had problems did establish ourselves. But the you lose many important years, because when you join a job, that's when you're most enthusiastic, you have many more ideas, and
Yeah.
you're spotted at that point. I mean, I think a mentor is very good. It's fantastic if you have a mentor. But even if you don't have a mentor, not having a spanner in the works is the next desirable, at least. So I think, this equal opportunities, I really like the concept that if you find that both are equally capable, give the advantage to the woman. Give the advantage to the woman. And it is essential. And, our electrical engineering department, we have now, I think, 9 women, maybe 9 or 10 women. And it matters how many you are, because and all very vocal women, of course, because we started, the first 3 were very vocal. So the rest of them followed suit. It's important to do that. Have yourself heard. Doesn't matter what others think. Stick to yourself. I mean, guys stick to themselves all the time. Why can't we stick to ourselves? So that is important to push. Yeah. Well,
Gita, as a sociologist who's been observing science and its workings for a long time, I would like to invite you to speak about this aspect somewhat critically from your experience of having studied this topic.
Yeah, so there's so much that one can talk about and think about. What are see, as Enakshi said, errors of omission versus errors of commission. Uh, if we were to look at science as a part of society, which it is, and despite the fact that it has been constructed as something which is ahistorical, asocial, apolitical, it's deeply embedded in social structures of society. You can see that from the fact that only certain kind of people get to do science, and their ways of looking at science tend to become dominant. Now, if you were to say that the structures of omission and structures of commission both actually get sanctioned through the social structures of patriarchy within and caste within scientific institutions, if I begin, which is as a sociologist, which is what is the premise that I begin with, if I begin with the premise, then I would say, of course, the onus falls on individuals to get themselves heard, for individuals to hear each other. But I think the question is beyond the individuals. It's a larger cultures of science that we all inhabit in scientific institutions also. So I'll pull out one or two things which I want to flag off. One is, I think, like in all other professions, the pressures for women to prove themselves in a very masculine space are double.
yeah.
So if you want to prove yourself as a good physicist, a good biologist, a good, chemist, I I gather from narratives that it is much harder for women to prove themselves. They have to work doubly, And the other thing is that it's continuously what we call, so making it up to what we call the glass ceiling, and making it up, higher in the order of promotions, higher in the order of getting awards and recognition. All of that, I think, is definitely constrained by social structures, which are both patriarchal and casteist. But I see a shift. I see a shift in the way women in science themselves are perceiving this. Say 30 years back, 30, 35 years, women in science would often think that it's their problem, or that it is a social problem. It's a problem of the fact that you have to manage marriage and science, or family and science. So therefore, a lot of role models will try to say that, I managed both. And, my family was so supportive, etc., etc. So we build that narrative. But what you see at the ground level is that women who are single also, who don't get married and do the very conventional feminine roles, also get discriminated against within science. So I think that is something that comes out very strongly, that even if women devote themselves completely to science and say, nothing else matters except science, even then the way they get their recognition is slower, and it's much more harder for women to get there. That is one thing that I wanted to say. And the other thing I want to say is that, the onus of changing this culture, often then people will put it on the women. Say this culture of science has to change, it has to become less patriarchal, women should do it. But there are so few women in any case. And for them to fit in, very often they have to play the game of toxic masculinity, which is what I'm working on now, And then they get blamed for that, saying, oh, look at these women, aren't they doing the same thing? And my point is that they are doing the same thing because they have to survive there, you know. And so therefore, why blame them more than others or the larger culture of science? So this idea of the reproduction of toxic masculinity among successful women in science is also something that I think I'm hoping to look at more carefully and more deeply. But Shubha, you yourself, took somewhere a decision to move into science-related things, not go into a career in science, but move into science communication. How did that would you like to sort of talk about that a little bit?
Well, actually, post my research went off quite well. My PhD years were, I was quite productive. But after that, during my postdoc years, my research was not going in the way that I wanted to. I had certain expectations of myself, and it wasn't really matching up to that.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, regardless of the fact how other people viewed it, I myself was not satisfied.
Yeah.
And this was due to many factors. But when this happened, I started looking around for an alternative career. And I
Yeah.
tried teaching physics for some time, and it wasn't so satisfactory for me. I taught at BITS Pilani for some time, but then I moved on to editing. I
Mm.
sat and I had to think really hard what was the next best thing I could do, and language kind of popped up. We had really good grounding in language in the
Mm.
convent school that I studied in. So with throwing up some prayers for the teachers who gave me this grounding, I took up editing and then subsequently went into journalism. And
Mm.
then there's been no looking back for me. It's been a great career as a science journalist.
Yeah.
When I joined, there were very few women in this game, and there were a few male journalists, but they were also very senior and doing very high level stuff.
Mm.
So at my level, there was a gap. So I conveniently came into that gap, and
Mm.
Hindu has always been the Hindu has been a good paper in that sense, giving a lot of space for science. So
Mm.
it was very welcoming, and I enjoyed my stay there for a decade. After which now I was interested in writing long form, and so that has given me a very nice break into balancing my two interests, which is science and the art of
Digital
writing.
writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in fact, this is something that I've been thinking about, and a lot of us have been speaking about a lot. That when we talk about doing science, very early on we silo-ize things. Doing science means, doing only this. Whereas doing science could be teaching science, it could be writing around science, it could be science communication, it could be science fiction. So the engagement with science, often we tend to think about doing science as only becoming professional scientists, but not the many and varied and rich ways in which we can actually diversify our understanding of science. So I guess when we are talking to young girls and women in science, I think it's important to keep this idea alive that, maybe you want to think of getting into science to do other things than just becoming a professional scientist. No, that's
Yeah,
also
I think that that idea has changed a lot over the last 2 decades, I think.
okay.
Recently, in the last few years, I see
Yeah.
there are many young people doing podcasts. They're doing,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
but
know,
Shubha, your training was useful, no? Even to be, yeah. So the training,
Absolutely, it gave me an edge completely. It gave me an edge over other people who are struggling. I could easily cover something in science, you see, whereas the average journalist who is not trained in science would be able to cover some of the aspects of science journalism, but not really the discoveries that people are making, the excitement of what is happening in the lab. Not
Yeah.
so much. So in that sense, my training was very useful. I'm not for a moment wanting to suggest that my training as a scientist was in any way less contributing to my career. When I said that about English, I'm just saying that it offers an alternative pathway completely,
Yeah.
Uh,
And I'm not even a scientist. I've spent 33 years in an engineering department, so I don't even know if I should call myself. Just,
Yeah, there are endless divides, no? I mean, I don't know whether medical doctors will call themselves scientists or not. Ultimately, we leave that portfolio only for the theoretical principles. No, sorry. Yeah. So I think it does open up. So the challenges, as you were asking me, Shubha, from what I mean, there are like Enakshi was talking about the two-body problem. All these are things that are happening. But what I'm seeing, what we are seeing is that women in science themselves are beginning to recognize, professional women scientists are beginning to recognize that the problems that they face, or maybe the bias, the discrimination, the lack of equal opportunity, as Enakshi was talking about, they face might not be just their fault, that they're beginning to realize and recognize and become more assertive and more demanding
yeah.
from scientific institutions and cultures. You see now organizations of women in physics, women in biology, all taking up some of these issues. The earlier generation, if you ask 30 years back, they would say,
You
everybody.
don't need this. You don't need this.
Yeah, we don't need this. Hannah, you wanted to say a little bit on that, and actually how that has changed now, hasn't it?
Yeah. So, being assertive is important. But I think most important is being confident, that you know your area or your subject, that you're an
So
expert.
how do you build that confidence, Enakshi, as a mentor of so many years? Because
Just hard work. There's no substitute. You just have to keep at it. And it doesn't matter if anyone encourages you. You have had up to PhD, you have had the training, and hopefully that training was, good. Not, the PhD also has to be good.
should the burden, Enakshi, be only on the individual to try to be confident? Don't we need more nurturing, mentoring cultures
Of
also?
course, that's what I said earlier, that having a mentor is great.
Hmm.
I'm saying, even if you don't have a mentor, as long as no one puts a spanner in your work, just build up on what you know and keep doing that.
Hmm.
And so that no one can touch you. In your area, no one can touch you. Okay.
Hmm.
And there are so many resources now, it's, in fact, even when I sit in interviews and somebody says, I come from a bad college, we didn't have resources. I won't want to listen to that at all now, because the whole internet is there. There are lectures, and what Khan Academy and that kind of things, which are supposed to be excellent, right? So build that, so that, and then you can assert yourself. No one will dare to touch you, because you have confidence and you have something to back up that confidence. So,
I
so
think
and I think,
can I just say something there?
yeah.
So I think doing all this by oneself is not, it's too much of a tall order for some people, at least, I think.
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard. That's why we should provide that for people who come after
There should
us.
be some,
And the ones who have succeeded shouldn't say, I did it on my own, therefore you should do it on my
Now
own.
you do
No,
it. Yeah.
no, no. You have to support, because everyone is different. I remember a young woman had joined our physics department and she left. She was disgusted and she left. And before that, she had a lot of trouble, and she would come and talk to me. And I used to tell her, I would fight. I would fight, because if I didn't fight, I would feel worse. But it's totally up to you. Everyone is not, it's not as if fighting solves, it might solve that problem, but then you get into much more trouble. So it is individual, right? And so that's why mentors help. And I think it's important for seniors, women and men, to support younger faculty, because younger gender men faculty also have problems sometimes. If, as you said, gender, caste, etc. If someone is a little offbeat, they have problems. So if you have hired somebody, it's the responsibility of the department to make sure that they flourish. It's not you hire somebody and then leave it to to their good luck, or whatever their own means. So
Enakshi, you must write about your experience of fighting and building up your
yeah, I have fought all my life.
You must write about that.
Yeah. And as I said, I mean, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But if I didn't fight, I would have suffered more myself. So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So
So should we?
I mean, I think we thought that we would have a small, quick round, third one, where we would speak a little bit about how we want to, what is a kind of in 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 certain kind of languages where we say, what is the kind of messaging, for example, that we would like to put out, for example, for younger people entering science, and what, Enakshi, you had spoken about this idea of demystifying. So is there something that you think that you might want to, both of you would like to, put out for young students, young girls, and who are entering science or who want to enter science?
yeah, I think it is much less now. A lot of women and young women do come into science. But, this aura that science and mathematics are difficult subjects, women can't do it. It is not. Anything you set your mind to, you can do. So I would tell young women, if they're interested, irrespective of what the society says or what their parents say, they should follow the path, and work hard. And you shouldn't dismiss something just because others say it is. If you don't find it interesting enough, you drop it at some other stage, but continue with it as long as you enjoy doing it, and you can do it without, don't pain yourself too much either. So you can do it easily and happily. And it's a good career, whether you do academics. And after moving to Bangalore, I meet a lot of my undergraduate and MTech students doing very well in industry. I'm so happy to see that, because somehow I wasn't in touch with them all these years. And they're vice presidents and they're directors and all that. It's such a joy to see that. So you can succeed. Don't worry about others. Just pursue.
Shubha?
Yeah, I think that even if at any that after getting your PhD, if you want to branch out into other areas, there are plenty of choices today. With the grounding of a PhD, you can do. I always, in my darkest moments, I always told myself, uh, with a PhD, you should be able to get a life for yourself. Don't be so, self-critical or whatever, and that gave me the impetus to go on and do things. So I think there's plenty you can do in the world after doing your PhD today. And for the I mean, people with authority, I would like to put in a request that you provide a lot of means to support things like science fiction or science writing, journalism. Many news agencies now have started recruiting for science correspondents. So this should be a more widespread. You can, if you look at many newspapers abroad, you always see that they have a section on science and people reporting, especially for science. So this culture should grow in the media. This is my dream for the scientific
Huh.
community.
Geeta, can I add just one more thing? I mean, you really don't have to do a PhD to pursue science. As I just mentioned, that there are now many more opportunities. And most people I was talking about just now, they're masters, undergrad, BTechs or MTechs, MS, this kind of thing. Doing a PhD is good, but PhD also involves a large number of years from you. So it's not necessary. You can pursue research and scientific career, maybe not academics. Academics, I think PhD is essential, but there are many other opportunities now.
Yeah.
So, the way I'd like to probably conclude this conversation, and if I were to think about, well, I'm not very good at messaging, but if I were to think in those terms, and if I were to mentor younger people, which I get the opportunity to do because I'm teaching courses on gender and science to young science students also sometimes. So my approach would be that science is society. It is part of society. So look at science as a social activity. I think this, because I'm a sociologist, I tend to put much more emphasis on the social aspects of doing science, of who gets to do science, who doesn't get to do science, what kind of science do we do, what does a science for the future look like in the kind of risk society that we are living in with climate change and war. My approach would be to suggest to individuals and institutions to look at science in a more integrated way. And for young people who are entering science, to also look at it not just in a telescope, narrow way of problem solving and getting to do science and building careers, but to look at it at a much wider thing. And that will then prepare young girls also to understand that a career in science, whether it is a professional academic career or a related career, a career in science is not going to be rosy. And, it's not that, oh, we build in only role models which are like, I did this and survived, I did that. And so, no, it is a challenge. It is difficult. But the point is that you have to be persistent and persevere if you really love doing science. And actually, science is, despite me being a critique of science, it's one of the most wonderfully beautiful human activities that we are all, as a species, involved in. And therefore, it should be available to everyone who wants to do it. And so we need to think about ways in which we make it more open and equal. But as far as young girls are coming into science, I think that they should be prepared better for the real world of science. And as you said, Enakshi, demystification is very important. And also the support system needs to develop. And I think if they start thinking of science for a better world, that would be really wonderful for us in the, for the future, So really, yeah, that's all that I want to say, that, it's beautiful, I guess, to do science, like it is beautiful to do many other things.
Yeah.
But it's also a challenge. It's also a challenge, and we have to make our choices wisely, and hope systems will help us do that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Gita, for that nice summary of the program. And
well, I always get accused about, oh, but you are not a scientist, you don't know. So,
hardly, I mean,
yeah.
You have the perspective.
No, one is you don't have to, do science to, understand.
Yeah, and by the way, not a rosy picture is not just for science, as if social sciences is a very rosy
Exactly.
Every field you go, music, art, everything is tough.
Yes,
Tough
absolutely.
to establish yourself.
It's just that I think you're absolutely right. But I think the difference lies in the fact that we construct science in a very
As a masculine. Yeah.
asocial, ahistorical, apolitical, the idea of the genius and all of that. No, we construct it as if it's something special.
Yeah. In fact, I used to, tease my TIFI batchmates and you have to smoke, 2 packets a day to do good science. You have to drink this many cups of coffee to do good science. What rubbish is that? Yeah.
And, we need to really think about this idea that, giving this special privileged status to the scientific, intellectual, and genius. I think we're done with that era. I think
I agree with you.
Ahead. Great.
Great meeting all of you. And
So shall we call it a close? We had thought that we would read some poems, no, Shubha? I think.
yeah, do you have a point?
I have one. Maybe we'll do another session with
Another day.
women
Yes.
in science. Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking.
Lovely talking to you.
Yeah. So
Thank you. Thank you
I
for
think
coming.
thank you, and thank you, Conference. Thank you, Enakshi. Thank you, Shubashree. Thank you, Pawan, for helping us with this.